All right, let's jump
Yeah.
in. Well,
All right.
thank you everyone again for being here. Good to see everybody. Always looking forward to this. Brendan and I were reading the last books yesterday on the bullet train from Kyoto to Hiroshima, which was a pretty cool experience to be sitting there bulleting across the world in at 200 miles per hour or whatever those trains go. A little bit different than Odysseus. But excited to do this with you today. So, as normal, I'm going to start by reading just a very short little passage on from these kind of four books that set the tone a little bit, and then we'll do a brief summary and jump right into our discussion. But thanks all for being here. Okay, without further ado. Zeus, king of gods and humans, you made thunder boom from a cloudless sky, a sign for someone. Fulfill a poor slave's prayer that this will be the last day that the suitors dine in style here in the old king's house. Oh, here comes Daniel. My knees are sore from this exhausting work from for grinding grains for them. I pray this is their final meal. And I just love this because there's so many quotes from this one, these four books that I could have chosen that are so ominous and foreshadowing of what's to come. Hey, Daniel.
Hey.
And so, uh, you know, last time we talked about Odysseus returning to Ithaca. He was home, but not really home yet. He landed on his home island, but hadn't even entered his house. Now he's finally back in his house, not just Ithaca, but he's still not quite home yet either. And in these four books, not a lot happens compared to some of the other four books where he's moving here and there, and there's monsters and there's all kinds of things happening and lots of action. This is kind of a slow play where you kind of really feel the tension getting tuned up. And so, one of the key questions I want to come to is like, what do we think make of Penelope now? We get to hear much more from her and see much more from her in this. Do we think that she recognizes Odysseus, and if she does, to kind of what level? Does she fully recognize him? Just hints of recognition. But looking forward to dig into that with all of you. So. With that, I'll pause and open it up and ask what we always do, which is like, first these four books, what stood out?
I'll yeah, so one thing that stood out to me is like if this were like a movie or a book, I guess it is a book. Um, like Penelope deciding to like start these final trials and like finally go through with ending her I don't know, I guess like becoming a widower and finding someone else like at the same time that Odysseus gets back, like it's like too much of like a plot like driven element of the story. But because like the gods are in this and are driving it, like it feels much more like fate is intervening and like driving uh like actual events. It doesn't quite feel like lazy authoring. It feels like fated and divine.
Marcus, to clarify, so like more like it's coming to a head, like the gods,
Yes.
everything are driving everyone together to decision points at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, but it feels like real, I guess,
Hmm.
if that makes
Not
sense.
just like an author's ploy to make it all
Yes.
wrap up nicely, but the
Yeah.
world's actually convening. Paul, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, further to Marcus's point, I was struck how obviously Odysseus has plenty of examples of people who are disrespecting him or his family, and plenty of cause to be angry about things. But even so, it seems like Marcus was mentioning the gods. There's a couple of times where Athena makes the treatment of him even worse in order to, I think it's to, I can't remember the exact phrase, but to kind of like drive fury into his heart or make his heart darker so that his rage will be even greater than it would be otherwise. So the role of the gods in kind of pushing this to an even more extreme resolution and perhaps would have been otherwise unaided by them.
Yeah, I agree that kind of like the turning the screws, the pushing the buttons. Athena's got her thumb on the button a little bit. She's like just pressing, trying to uh, get Odysseus more worked up, try and get the suitors to kind of show a little bit more their behavior and who they really are. People start to reveal themselves in different ways to kind of drive us towards the resolution of the story and who's on the good guys team, so to speak, and who's going to get what's coming to them a little bit. But Daniel, did I see you come off as well? Did you want to add something?
No, I just had my mute on the wrong selection. But one thing that I did read a little note about is that in 19, when Penelope is talking to the beggar and tells her dream of like the eagle and the geese, like at that point, I'm wondering like, oh, does like Penelope like, and she's talking setting up the whole thing with the axes, right? So I'm just going like, did she notice them? Like, did she recognize them at that point or not? Right? Like it's kind of hard to tell. Like, I
What
thought that maybe, like, like is if it was like a normal thing without gods and without crazy dreams, that like I think that she would be hinting that she recognizes them, but maybe not.
well, what do you think? We'll open it up to everybody here. What do you think? Do you think where on the spectrum of recognition from full recognition to no recognition do you think she falls?
I think that she's sitting at probably 8 out of 10. But later on, right? Like, like in the last few books, it doesn't seem that way. But at this point, if you're only reading up to like, like 19, you it seems like she actually noticed like there's like she notices there's something weird going on, right? That this beggar isn't completely normal. And that I would say like, 8.5 out of 10 would be the recognition.
John, do you want to jump in?
I just wanted to add one little detail. I remember from that scene where Penelope says something like, you don't talk like the typical beggar, like you seem very well spoken. Um, and I don't know if anyone has watched Bridgerton, but that just reminded me a bit of, noticing someone's, class background and being like puzzled, like, oh, like, wait, you're something different. Like, where did you come from? But
Yeah, there's lots of little clues hidden in there that create a lot of ambiguity, right? Which ambiguity is very good for tension, which is what we're building, as we go to get to all the recognition and what's to come for the suitors. So I think that ambiguity, but there are little pieces that they're picking up on, whether it's the omen, whether it's the way he speaks, whether it's the background stories that he gives to describe himself. But Colleen, please, what do you have to add?
No, I just wanted to add that I thought that some aspects of this were a little bit like comic relief. 'Cause they're like kind of funny. Like the some of the earlier scenes between when Odysseus first arrives and meets the suitors and is asking as a beggar for food and they're kind of like going back and forth and you're sort of I guess I'm sort of thinking like you know, I'm trying to put myself in this time period a little and in this kind of space of everything. And, Odysseus kind of talks back to them and challenges them. And even though he's there as a beggar. And it's almost kind of funny, like in a way, it makes me think sometimes of some of the like opening kind of slapstick comedy scenes of Shakespeare. Like one of the suitors throws a chair at him at some point. I mean, uh, it's just kind of like, and a little bit also, we've talked through this whole time about how Odysseus always has to say something. Like he just always makes things worse for himself. And it's kind of like even now he's in disguise and he still always has to get some last word in or like at some point he's like chastising one of the suitors and is like, you just think you can tease me, but if Odysseus, the real owner, were here, the doors would be a lot bigger, like you wouldn't be so like sure of yourself then. Um, and it just I don't know, I kind of found it hilarious, some parts of it really funny.
That is like the intelligence of Odysseus, right? His wittiness back, how quickly his mind works. It comes back to over and over. And it seems like some of that is playing out as he kind of taunts and teases and jabs at these people who think they're, these great suitors, and a beggar's showing them what's what, and talking back. Highly unusual, right? Back to John's point of like, who talks, beggars don't talk this way. This isn't quite right. Yeah. Julie, please.
Um, One of the things I noticed is I don't know if it was the last two of the chapters where Odysseus was speaking a lot and also Penelope, and almost every time, like the author says, wise Odysseus or warily Penelope, and like just like so many adjectives about Odysseus, clever or thoughtful, But then there were so many also about Penelope, and I felt like, okay, Penelope is a match for this guy who everybody loves and thinks is like a god. And then another couple things that stayed with me that are like
Julie, I
small.
want to stop. I want to stop you there because I think that's a really good point on Penelope. We shouldn't just rush past. So we'll give you a chance to come back with your other points. But did anybody else notice that matching? And I'm curious what other people thought about the kind of juxtaposition of Penelope and Odysseus and kind of how they're framed and the way they behave.
I don't have a lot to say on this, but yeah, I think the what makes the story compelling is the idea that they are like a power couple, right? Like, um, there is something special about Penelope. I think beyond her passivity and loyalty. Um, and one line that stuck out to me from Penelope is, I can't remember it exactly, but she says something to the effect of, um, I will not make a lesser man happy, like by taking someone else as a husband. So she basically is like, I'm top quality and like Odysseus is top quality and like there's really no settling for anything less.
John, that was one of the two other points I was going to make, is that exact line. I have it right here, and I love the phrasing, "Let me not make a lesser husband glad." It's like, whoa, rock on, strong woman. Let me not make a lesser husband glad. Wow, it's a lot of moxie.
Yeah, I absolutely, I love it. And I think that when Odysseus goes to the underworld, there's some of that. Like, remember Agamemnon is talking about how bad women are, because he went home and got killed by Clytemnestra, and his wife. But others like, well, Penelope's a little different. Penelope's so smart of all the women, and so I do really think that throughout the story, Homer is setting them up as equals, and is trying to show how equals, maybe not in terms of like social standing, but equals in terms of intelligence and wit this isn't power doesn't come from just pure strength anymore like it did in the Iliad, of this kind of just to the strongest win and the warrior, but more of how smart and capable you are of designing and manipulating around you. And she's the one who proposes a lot of the ways that gets the suitors out, with the axe game and stringing the bow and things like that. It's not Odysseus who puts the idea in her head, but it's her who's bringing it to the table. And one of my mom's favorite lines I know from a movie is what's that movie called? Like My Big Fat Greek Wedding. And it's like the man may be the head of the household, but the woman is the neck, and she can move the head any way she wants. And I just kept thinking about that as I was watching this, as I was reading this section of just oh yeah, there's a lot of strength and wisdom, or and intelligence in Penelope and how she strung the suitors along. And then did anyone notice what she did to the suitors when she came out and kind of revealed herself?
Yeah, I think she extracted gifts from all the suitors. I think book 18, something like that. And like right after the boxing match. And that was actually a strange marital moment too, right? Because like the beggar sees this, Odysseus sees this, and he's quite proud of her, right? He thinks like that's cool, right? Look at what she just did, right? So like that's a whole like the whole power couple dynamic, and the marital moments are actually kind of odd. Like it's not what you would expect, right? Like he's just standing there like, yeah, that's cool.
And yeah, so exactly right, Daniel. So she extracts these gifts from the suitors, and she also gets them to leave for the night so that she can have a conversation in private with Odysseus by the fire, right? So she's clearly, we can get back. Well, maybe last time I made everybody pick sides of whether Odysseus was growing or not. Maybe this time we can pick our number for where on the spectrum, Penelope's recognition is. I'd be curious. I imagine the range would be quite wide, but it does seem that she's got something up her sleeve from some of the very beginnings of these books. So she's weeping a lot and she's doing these things, but she seems to have some level of recognition that goes along. But Selena, please.
No, I was just curious if has anyone read the other versions of the book, because Emily Wilson apparently has this feminist bias in quotes, but I don't know if the character comes differently in different translations. I mean, it's just we can leave it for later.
Good question.
No, it's a great question. I have not read other editions of this. I did watch The Return, which is, kind of like a very different story. And before we all meet again next month, I'll have read the Penelope ad by Margaret Atwood that kind of goes into that version, but I haven't read any of the direct translations, or the other translations to see how they frame Penelope.
But I think to your point about the weeping, there was I think one passage about her when she talks to Odysseus is, her face melts. I think it's of her cheeks melt. And it's that very strong, picture of, like snow in a mountain or something. So it's total, I don't know, it's not exactly sublimation, but there's something going on there that is very strong. The way it's, described or
And
translated.
and she also said, intimations like, I would like you to stay here, like you are wowing me so much. If things were different, I would like you to stay here, and I would like to know you more. I don't have the passage in front of me, but she says that at the end of their conversation.
Yeah, so someone welcomes him into the house, maybe perhaps a little bit more than the average beggar.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I find that dialogue that they have, after the suitors are gone for the night by the fire, almost flirtatious. Like there's like an undertone of like they seem to be playing a game a little bit, to me at different times in the way they speak and the way she's like, well, why don't I set up a game? And we'll test everybody here and see how it goes. She's like basically finding a way to get a weapon into his hand and allow him to reveal himself. So it's hard for me to imagine that she doesn't have some level of recognition. Selena, to your point, even the extent of her weeping seems above and beyond the weeping for a husband who's been gone 20 years, but maybe more of a release, of like the hope that he might be returning, because she gets many more, uh many more stories that suggest like Odysseus is here, or he's like on the verge of return, and so maybe she's giving into some hope, a little bit there.
I
But does
guess
anybody else have
just
it? Oh,
yeah,
please go ahead.
just in contrast to that hope, I mean, there's that. Well, Julie mentioned that one line about lesser men, but that's part of that long kind of lament prayer that she gives at night. And it's really extreme. I mean, she's basically asking the gods to take her life, in multiple ways. Now, at the end, she does. This is book 20, like line 60 on to 90 or something. But at the end, she does say, like, last night a man was sleeping by me just like him when he marched off to war, which again is that recognition. But I mean, I have to feel that's almost, subconscious or something, given that she's just spent, excuse me, that early part of that prayer, like basically asking to die. If she is so hopeful that he's there or about to be there, I don't know if she would be kind of expressing so much despondency at that moment.
Yeah, what do folks think about that passage in particular? So book 20, the it's kind of starts on, line 60. Oh, Artemis, majestic goddess, daughter of Zeus, if only you would shoot an arrow in my heart and kill me now, or let a gust of wind take hold of me and carry me across the misty clouds and fling me where the waters of the ocean pour forth and back again, and goes on until this kind of long story where she's very much seems in the fit of like, this is just too hard. I can't endure anymore. Go ahead, Brett.
I think it's just in the same vein as the rest of kind of building dramatic tension. The idea of like there's all this emotion that has been building up over the course of the entire play, and we're now about to release all of it, and you want to kind of take that to a crescendo. And so she's got the natural like, I'm literally on the edge of death for myself emotionally. Everybody here is on the edge of death. The stakes are the highest they can be for every single person possible.
I also think that several of these books are, as is very noticeable, less action oriented. There, of course, is some action, but there's more of the psychological and the reflective and internal motivations, and also I think can be true that when you feel like you are closer to maybe getting your heart's desire, not having it can be even more painful. So maybe she is feeling it, but she's also that can raise the specter of really, feeling the desire more, but still it might not come through.
Yeah, exactly. We're reaching that crescendo. The tension's high. She's at her breaking point. Everyone's at their breaking point of how much more they can resist. He has one where he's, I can't. It would take me a second to find the line, but it's something to the effect of like, he's so mad. He's like, and he's like he thinks back to the Cyclops, and he's rolling in his bed like with frustration and trying to restrain himself from doing these. So everybody's kind of at that breaking point as we go. And then I think to the question of this lot, this speech in particular, as soon as she finishes, the very next paragraph says, or stanza says, as she said this, the golden dawn arrived. Odysseus heard his wife weeping and became confused. He thought that she was standing by his head and that she had already recognized him. And so again, more ambiguity thrown in of like, even Odysseus is like, why is she crying so hard? Like, doesn't she know I'm back now? Like, we got a plan. And so is he just hopeful, and he's also kind of excited about what might come, but he's a little ahead of himself as he kind of wakes up from sleep at dawn and kind of sees what day it's going to be, wishing it forward a little bit. And to me, this is, or Max, please jump in.
Uh, Sorry, Rand. I know I wanted to the same thing along that line, the last line there, where she says, "My heart was cheered. It seemed a vision, not a dream." That dream thread brought me back to close to the end of book 19 in like line 580, where she makes the example of the two gates of a dream, where one is made of ivory and it has trickery and falsehood, and the polished horn is the true one. And then that brings me back to book 4, where I think it was Athena that pretends that she's in her dream, right? And talks to her. And so I don't know, the aspect of a vision compared to a dream, um, she has more faith in what a vision is maybe than what a dream. A dream can cause the trickery because of those two gates, but I just found that kind of interesting.
Yeah, exactly. A great addition, Max. And hello to you and Luca today. It's a little bit of like the again, this ambiguity through the entire section. It's like Homer never wants you to be certain when you read a paragraph what's actually happening, because she says right after that, last night a man was sleeping by me, just like him when he marched off to war. And Odysseus wakes up confused, thinking, that she was standing by his head, already recognizing him. Like it's almost like they rejoined each other already. Like it felt so real to both of them, totally different than just a dream. No, to your point, like a vision. And so we're getting closer and closer and closer as ekes along, to true recognition. So maybe on that front, I'm curious, just for the sake of the game and to hear different perspectives a little bit further. Um, how would people rate, maybe on the 1 to 10, since Daniel started that, or high, medium, low, or however you want to do it. But what's your sense, and justification for, um, whether Penelope, recognizes Odysseus? I'm curious to get the feel of the crowd here. And also, I acknowledge that I know not everyone's read the last 4 books yet as well. So just, as you're reading now, or whatever context you have, no right or wrong answers here.
I think it's pretty clear that she doesn't know who he is. Like that's I feel like the intention of Homer is creating all this tension, and the ambiguity and the emotional tension is there to build the stakes. But the most clear point on this matter, I think, is when the slave woman touches his leg and feels the scar, and she like has this moment of recognition, and that's like a big deal, right? Like you can also imagine it like an episode of Game of Thrones, right? And like the eyes light up and you're like, oh, this like tension's coming to a head. And then she like looks over at Penelope. The goddess has literally turned Penelope's face away to make sure she doesn't see. And then Odysseus grabs her, and like I was thinking about the language that Emily Wilson chose, but like he grabs her by the throat. Like if you were just gonna like gently grab somebody's neck and turn their face away, like you wouldn't use the word throat. But she's essentially implying that like and then he threatens to kill her. He's like, hey, if you, as cool as you are, if you say anything, I will literally murder you. So I feel like between the goddess pushes Penelope's eyes away and Odysseus says, I will murder you even though you're on my side, if Penelope finds out, like it's fairly clear to me that Homer is indicating that Penelope doesn't on any conscious level know that Odysseus is there.
I agree. Oh,
Go.
I agree, and I also think that Odysseus is, I think it's kind of clear that Odysseus is in that meeting with Penelope at night, is trying to kind of also get a sense of, like, what has Penelope been doing while I'm away? Like, has she been loyal? Like, what's going through her mind? Um,
Yeah, he's testing her, right? And then I think it gets to the question of, is she answering as though he's a stranger, like innocently, or is she also shaping the narrative? But Sue.
I tend to read things very literally, so I didn't like have the insight to go, oh, this is fake. I read it as like, no, she doesn't know yet. And I think the reason I didn't question that is because, when the son and he came to like, oh my gosh, you're the real guy. They were, it's like, oh my gosh, you can't like hide that. I'm thinking the same thing with the slave. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And I don't did any feeling at all that she had that like, could this be you? Could this be you? So I didn't, I would have said that they don't, Penelope doesn't know. Whether there's a connection or chemistry or something about this guy being different is something else, but I don't think she thinks it's Odysseus.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
Homer's messing with us the whole time though. Right? Like, even when the slave, the nanny, like feels the scar and goes, oh, there's just before the moment of recognition. Homer cuts away and spends like 70, 80 lines talking about the whole backstory. Hey, let's just casually talk about, like him and his cousins, and they're going away in the woods, and like how the boar like backed into like the space, and it's very evocative of that like that hunting thing. But it was just like just before there's that recognition, the narrative just completely takes like a 90-degree turn and goes towards this, hey, there's this great hunting story, and this is how he got his scar. So I think like, like through like that, like I see what Brendan's saying about like, like the tension's building. We're going to a crescendo, everything's building up, but then he'll like suddenly just mess with you. And all of a sudden it's like we have a hunting story now, man. It's like let's talk about how he got the scar. When really all you really had to say, if it was just building up in the same direction, is like, oh, when he was young, he got the scar. Everybody knows about it. Nanny recognized recognition, right? But anytime there's any sort of recognition or like about to have recognition, Homer's just completely messing with us.
Kind of to Daniel's point, to me, the question is not does Penelope know or not? Like in a way, like maybe that's a diversion, because what it points my attention to is the master writer that he is, and that he is so masterful at telling a story that, like you said, Grant, the use of ambiguity and how that just adds to the story.
Anybody else want to weigh in, agree or disagree with some of the points so far? Marcus, were
Yeah,
you going to say something?
yeah, yeah. I agree with all that, and like the other, I think we've mentioned everyone who has recognized him except the dog, and like the dog has that same like instant like reaction of like, oh my God, he's back. Um, but to Penelope, she very clearly knows something is up, and I'm trying to think of like all the news that's been like reaching about Odysseus because I feel like they didn't hear much for like 20 years. And then Telemachus goes on this little journey and gets all kinds of news from all these people. So like all this news is like pouring in, pouring in, pouring in. And I don't know, to me it seems like to her this guy is just like one more like little step on this ladder of evidence that like okay maybe something is going on and he's on his way back, but yeah, I don't think she fully recognizes that this is him.
Certainly not in the way that Argos does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, did anybody cry at that part with the dog? I watched The Return. I cried there. I read like like the Wilson version. I cried. I read the Fago version and I cried. Am I just a massive suck, or like, does anybody else feel that way? But the dog just looks up and then like, like black darkness like overtakes him. That's it. Like he's done. And like so besides the crying part, it's like how can a dog and everybody else recognizes them, but not his wife, right? Like I'm guessing he spent more time with his wife than his dog, but maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, I really like the dog scene. Certainly at an emotional level, I did think it was touching. Um, I also think it's well, it answers one question, like, and I thought it was really interesting that that's like his first encounter. It almost frames his entire return home is this encounter with the dog and the dog's death, um, which is seems more like an ending, but it's the beginning of this kind of resolution. And one of the ways I read it is, it answers the question of like, what is the cost of Odysseus's absence? Like what has been lost to time? And like the dogs, dogs have short lives, right? So like, they make it clear like the dog would have been a great dog and the dog loved Odysseus and um but like the dog didn't get to spend that time with his master, and he will never get that time, like because the dog is gone. So there will be no like glorious redemption. There will be no reunion like the other characters might enjoy. So, um, Yeah, I thought that was one function of the dog was like to just drive home like, you know, uh there were these like lost years that, people will never get back. Um and then I also think, I mean, not like if I was writing this story for a modern audience, I would really emphasize the dog encounter first, like before he goes testing the slaves, for their loyalty and which are things that probably make us less comfortable. I think the dog just conveniently, serendipitously turns out to be such a gentle introduction to that theme of like loyalty, because that's like one of the few kind of relationships where we still are comfortable saying like, a loyal dog is a good dog. Like, um, and so it was just a way to like, uh, yeah, combine, I don't know, like a sweet moment also with like this theme of, um, you know, uh, like the return of, the master and the, yeah, like importance of, um, yeah, that like enduring loyalty.
I actually thought was found it a little puzzling, the dog scene. Um, and I think it could just be cultural about the way like the Greeks treated their dogs or whatever, but it's kind of it's like this beloved dog of Odysseus. And it says like when, initially like the boys would take the puppy out to hunt and everything, but then Odysseus leaves and they just like abandon the dog in like filth and fleas, and no one, even like Telemachus, like takes care of him. And I don't know if that's like it's just expected that like the slaves would be the ones who take care of it, and so Odysseus is not there, or if it's like, we know that Telemachus has kind of not really been taking the role of master. He's only like slowly starting to grow into this. So maybe it's kind of representative of just how bad things were with Odysseus gone. But
Yeah, I think that's the read is it's less literal than like, oh, why didn't Telemachus do it? And more of the reminder of the overall theme I think that we've been seeing from the beginning, which is like the kingdom is unhealthy without its king. And you need to bring that to like a very fine point. And having the dog who's like kind of a universally lovable and appreciate like something that any audience member can be like, oh yeah, a puppy, that's great. We all know a great puppy. And then seeing that the shape it's in, I think is an incredibly adept symbol for just the disrepair of the kingdom, which I think is a really good. Yeah, Homer's very good at this. The a lens that I kind of kept thinking throughout this period is like if we're reading it as just words on a page. If you were thinking about like I wanted to make a TV show and there was an episode that was these four books, like what would the lighting be like, and what would the music be like, and what are all of these other tools you would have to create the emotional cues that you're trying to drive towards? Because I think that's the four books here are so much more about the emotional cues than they are about the action and the literal things that are happening. And there's two places where I think that's like really specific. And one of them is the dog. Like you can just imagine that episode of Game of Thrones and it's super dark and you look over and the lighting is just like all shadows and you've got this sad dog and the music is like intense and it cuts to Odysseus and he's like trying to, hold back his tears and, he walks inside and how that would create this sense of like, oh my God, things are so bad. Like things have to get put right before you go into the scene where all the, handsome bad guys are and they start being assholes. But like you have this sense walking through the door then of like, wow, there's a great injustice that needs to be fixed. And then the other scene of that is when the prophet like gets kicked out because he's like, oh, there's some shady shit that's about to happen here. And the way it's written is before I can find the exact phrase, but like before the prophet says like this is a prophecy, it's written as if literally their faces are darkening and there's like blood pouring forth and all these things, and you can imagine again as like a trick of the director of Game of Thrones where he would just like change the lighting. Everybody's laughing, having a good time, and then the lighting would go super intense, and you'd start to see some like allusions to blood instead of wine and these different things. And then the prophet says that. And again, it's just like making you as the audience be like, holy shit, there's some really dark stuff bubbling underneath the surface. And I think, yeah, that's that kind of emotional weight that is trying to be built in the mind of the audience before we go into the next four books and we have like, the awesome battle scene where everybody dies. It's like it actually really does track super well to how you would do a season of television. Like this is the perfect episode to do right before the Battle of the Blackwater, and then you have the great resolution at the end.
Yeah, on both of those, I think is great reflections from everybody. But the Argos thing, he's literally in dung. He's like there. He's there. Homer is definitely showing you in the same way that there's in many of the earlier books we had like a compare and contrast between proper Xenia and bad Xenia and other things. It's like he's showing what's happening to the civilization of Ithaca. He's showing the island in many ways still remains loyal, that like the place will recognize him and accept him, and there's death on the way. So it's like there's just every bit little bit of layer. And then the point the place that Brennan was reading or referring to is Athena turned the suitors' minds. They laughed unstoppably. They cackled, and they lost control of their own faces. Plates of meat began to drip with blood. Their eyes were full of tears, and they began to wail in grief. The prophet Theoclymenus addressed them. What awful things is happening to you? Your faces, heads, and bodies are wrapped up in night. Your screams are blazing out like fire. The ornate palace ceilings and the walls are spattered with your blood. The porch is full of ghosts, as in the courtyard, ghosts descending into the dark of Erebus. The sun has vanished from the sky, and gloomy mist is all around. I mean, we went pretty quick to some pretty dark stuff there, like horror movie type things, where they're showing what's about to happen. So again, like these four books, the illusions that he builds up and the way that he's setting up the big reveals, the big battles, all these things are really quite intense. John, please.
Yeah, so I mean, clearly there is a lot of foreshadowing, a lot of suspense, a lot of ambiguity, a lot of dramatic irony, where the audience knows things, the characters don't. So, I mean, these are all great storytelling techniques, of course, and it's very impressive to see them in Homer so long ago. I just want to add one other, maybe like substantive uh, justification or reason for how drawn out this is, right? I think, like, again, as great as the dripping tension is, I think you could criticize the pacing here, like, because so little is happening and it's like, 1,000 steps to get, to the destination. Um, but one reason I think, is like it's important to prove that that the suitors like deserve the vengeance that's coming for them. So there are so many scenes where you know like there's enough time for them to kind of dig their own grave and tie their own rope and just demonstrate their lack of morality and sensitivity and lack of piety, even. So, um, yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why it has to be so long is like really big human actions are going to take place, like violent human actions. And there's this sense of like, okay, we need to make sure that this really is um, justified, I guess is how we would put it in modern language. But this does come through a little bit even in Odysseus's like personal reflections at one point where he says like, whoa, like I think he's actually directly speaking with Athena, if I recall, and he says like, I'm about to kill these people, and like that's a really, big deal. And like, what if I get punished by the gods for this? And she assures him like, no, like this is, like you're doing God's work, like just keep going. But yeah, there is this sense of like, the people who are going to be condemned and punished, like there has to be enough screen time to show that they really deserve it and like they are, as irredeemable and wicked as they are presented.
On yeah, on that same thread, like on the justification of the killing and the um like the tension of Odysseus here. It's like he's spent so much of this story benefiting from the xenia of others, like staying in their homes and having their food. So he comes home and these are people in his house technically, right? So like he kind of has to do his due diligence of like, hey, these are people in my home, like should I be okay with, having them have the food and having the place to stay? So I think for all the benefit he's gained, he also has to like, get that same justification. It's like, no, this is not hospitality. This is like egregious, theft.
Yeah, I think. Oh, Julie, please.
Related to that hospitality, I noticed twice in these chapters that I think it's Odysseus both times where he says, I I swear or I vow by Zeus and hospitality. And on the second one, he says, by Zeus and hospitality and hearth. And I just thought, wow. And I know that's one of the themes of the book is hospitality. But wow, he's swearing by Zeus and by hospitality. Like that's the elevation of that virtue. I just thought that said a lot to me. And just the echoes of that in other religions, both, Christianity, feed the be kind to the stranger, and I think Judaism and others, Buddhism and
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. This is moralizing, right? This is very clear. There's a moral that they want you to take away from this and the Xenia concept, and they have to show how bad these people really are. They have to get you on the side of Odysseus and Penelope a little bit for what's about to happen. And you see even with Melantho, who's the slave girl. He is testing her, but she is multiple times, and then she's scorned not only from Odysseus for her poor behavior, but she's scorned by Penelope. And Penelope says, "Didn't I tell you I wanted to talk to him? Like this is no way to treat somebody in our home." So they go out of their way. And there's another I don't know how to pronounce his name. If the Philoetius. I should look it up. But one of the people who comes in to with the swineherd, Aramaeus and Eumaeus, and comes in and is like, "Hey, I can immediately like, hey, good morning. I see you're down on your luck. I really hope things get better for you." And goes on to give a speech about how, man, he wishes like Odysseus was back. So again, Homer's giving us many compare and contrast between someone who's doing it right and someone who's doing it wrong. Someone's doing it right and somebody's doing it wrong over and over, so that we're so on the side of like, I cannot believe these villains. Like that you really do have to make a villain so that when they get their comeuppance, it feels just along the way. And so I think that's a great point of how they do that. And they do it in many different ways too. They don't recognize omens. They don't, they don't connect their bad behavior to ruin, and they don't heed the visions of Theoclemenus. And then the other one is, did anyone pick up on one of the characters who seemed a little bit kind of in between? One of the suitors who was kind of some of the scenes where there's some doubt that's starting to be seeded about their behavior, even among the suitors.
I noticed that, and I can't remember who it was or what happened, but yeah, one of them was like questioning his or their behavior.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're gonna get a little bit of like who gets to live through this and who doesn't, and what what is the cost for the behavior, even if you kind of recognize it. And so again, I think it's adding it adds a little bit of ambiguity again, but it also is going to help Homer wrap up some of the moralizing here and what it really means to be a good guest. It's good to have someone not just on the opposite ends of the spectrum, but someone in the middle, and how and how they're treated along the way.
Yeah, I think
Daniel.
this testing and is like building, like slowing the story down to it's actually resetting of the story, right? Like this is like coming home. What does home actually mean? So now we have to like talk about that part of the story. This is a home. We sort of know what Xenia is. We need have to show the testing is like kind of like setting up the moral architecture. Like you're figuring out like basically like which side it, and as like a reformed accountant, this is actually an audit. So Odysseus goes into his own house and he's not just hiding, he's auditing. He's testing out all the different people that are in there, like Melanthius, Philo, whatever the name that I can't pronounce either. And even the Penelope, right? Like they're basically like just figuring out like what auditing what each person is like. And in doing so, um, like it actually sets the scene because if he just went in there and just killed everybody, that's just a tyrannical massacre, right? That's like, but when you run this audit, what you get from the other end is that you get like a slow indictment. Then that sounds like justice, right? That feels right. That's actually like justice coming to a completion, right? That's like something that we should want, right? So I see it as like setting up the rest of the story and setting up like and the whole all four books is basically slowing down the story, turning it around so that it's not an adventure anymore. It's about the coming home, what home means, and then and yeah, running the audit.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely an auditing happening here. There's no doubt. He's taking stock, and he's taking stock for himself and for us, to understand where it's headed. Max, you
I'm
want to
just a
jump in and
little
say
sad
something?
that there weren't any stats involved. No green pens and stats. Otherwise, that would have made it perfect for me.
That's great. I was thinking for your question on the suitors that maybe are in the middle, is it Amphiminus, I think? So Amphiminus, the part I liked morally was after Odysseus fights, he talks and mostly he talks directly to Amphiminus on was it book 18 lines 130 to like 150 or so. I like his speech there, the moralities of like he talks about of all the creatures that live and breathe and creep on earth, we humans are the weakest. We have when the gods bring misery and pain to us, we have to bear our suffering with calm. I think he talks about himself when he says, you know, he says that he lost his brothers. He's abused his powers, committed many crimes of violence, abetted by my brothers and my father. So maybe there's an aspect there that he still thinks about his father. But I think Amphiminus, I think it hits him. Afterwards he talks. Homer talks about how he has like a troubled heart and his head's bowed down low, and then afterwards in like book at the end of that book where Telemachus kind of tells off the suitors because they get that footstool that is thrown at Odysseus, right? Same thing. Amphiminus kind of tells the suitors, my friends, what he has said was fair. No one needs to take offense. Do not abuse the stranger nor the slaves who work in great Odysseus's house. So maybe that's one of the suitor characters that are kind of, in the middle part. Maybe they get saved, maybe not, but he's working on it. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's exactly the one I was thinking of. And he comes back. And there's a couple different places where they're talking about, oh, let's kill Telemachus, and then he kind of reads an omen. I'm like, this doesn't seem right. So we get a lot of this, and then Telemachus is again set up in the same way he is from the very beginning of like he knows what good behavior is, and he starts to speak up and demand it of people, and people are like, whoa, where is this coming from? Like this is a different guy than was here at the beginning of in the first four books, who was, a weakling and, a young boy, not a young man, and kind of the shape of this. So maybe just to kind of wrap up, one other thing I wanted to get to, did anyone, uh, what did folks think about the part about Odysseus's name? Did anybody catch that or in the story about, sitting on his grandfather's lap and how he was named? I thought some people might have questions on that, so I did a little research, but curious if that jumped out to anybody or if anybody wants to add anything. Well, the quick background is he's the grandfather's like, yeah, I don't like anybody, nobody likes, I don't like anybody, nobody likes me. Let's name the boy Odysseus, which comes from a Greek verb, which means to hate, to be angry at, to cause pain, to suffer hostility. So the name carries kind of layered meanings, often rendered as the man of pain, the hated one, he who causes suffering, the one who suffers. Um, all of that is kind of, I was reading the thing like, oh, normative determinism strikes again. The Greeks really love to name things, in quite that way, and it gives new meaning to like a little bit of like how we use Odysseus, um, uh, in modern language. Like we talk about an Odyssey, and it provides so much information. Like his name, even in the Greek, provides so much information. Yeah,
I
Odious, John, exactly,
I
exactly.
know that it was earlier than that, but he's talking about himself, and at one point he says, "I am a man of sorrows," which makes me wonder if that's another meaning of his name, a man of sorrow. And of course, what is, "Oh brother, where art thou?" Um, echoes with that.
Absolutely. Which is many people's favorite, film adaptation of the Odyssey. If you haven't seen it yet, worth checking out. Paul?
Oh no, Julie, are you referring to the song title in there of Man of Constant Sorrow?
Yeah, and isn't that
Yeah.
a Judy Collins song or Leonard Cohen or somebody? One of those old, for those of us that are older than you guys, people from the 70s and 80s.
Sue, did you want to add anything?
Oh, this is kind of off subject, but he had reminded me when he talked about how at the beginning of the book he was a young man and a young boy almost, and now you really see him as Telemachus as the growing up to be an adult. And a couple times there was a reference of when he gets to be old enough to have a beard, then this will happen. And a little bit with Penelope, we were saying like, okay, after all this time, we got to cut to the case, when he's old enough to have a beard and be a man. So I think maybe it's all part of the crescendo kind of thing. But like in addition to all these other things happening, is Telemachus is actually growing up and becoming an adult, and just one more piece of that, in a couple things together describing that same thing.
Yeah. It's Daniel helped me last time. Was it the Bill Dung's roman of this story of just the coming of age? I'm sure that is a horrible rendering of that word, but
Yeah,
I'm trying
someone
to.
failed German in like high school.
But Julie, did you want to add something?
Yeah, one other thing that it was just a small little part, but it really spoke to me deeply. It was in book 20, like line 40 or so pretty near the beginning, where Athena says to him, basically, "Oh, ye of little faith," and she says, "So stubborn, most men trust their friends and even weaker mortal friends, and whose judgment is far worse than mine. And I'm a goddess, and like I've given you all this help. Like when are you gonna?" She says, even if we were ambushed by 50 gangs, you are going to be okay, and I am with you. So that was just personally spoke to me and my own not trusting something in my life.
Yeah, I like that. That's the fun part about reading, right? You find little things everywhere, little lines that you like, little things that stick with you. I thought they had a line about Dawn again that just like really struck me, like Dawn on the throne. And I was like, oh, that's such a great way to put that. And just little lines. I have trouble sometimes when we're talking because I've got all my notes here from the book. I've highlighted so many things that I thought were liked or interesting that don't make it into our conversations here. So Julie, I like that. I'm just, a little line here or there that speaks just to you.
Yeah. And I also, Lucas, if you want to share anything, I really want to invite you in now, or if you want to think about it for a few minutes. Just, I'm really curious about what the book at this point is like for you, or anything you'd like to share, or something you liked about it.
Luca, you're the star here, man. People love to hear from you. Anything you want to add today?
Um, I don't know. I liked your question on how Odysseus's wife, how she feels about Odysseus gone and like if he's really there. Cause like I was thinking that like a different topic of all you guys like where you guys were saying that he probably doesn't know if she's there. I mean that he's there. But that like maybe she doesn't know that he's physically not there, but he's been her she's been his wife for like a long time, so she probably knows like that the beggar could be him, or like in a way that maybe she's just not telling him.
Yeah, Luca, I think you and I are pretty close on that. I think there's some recognition going on here. I think she's pretty smart. I think she's starting to lay the plans a little bit, like with the string, the bow, and the axe game. I think there's a little bit where um, she's indicating to me that she's perceptive of what's going on and trying to go, okay, well, if it's really him, we're going to set this up. Let's test it. She has kind of her own testing that's coming up. But I'll be excited to see um, what you make of it in the next four books. Anything else you want to add, Luca, while you got the mic?
Not really.
Okay. Well, thanks for jumping in. And we're getting towards the end here. We covered a lot of the main themes and things that I really wanted to make sure that we got to. But is there anything that folks didn't get to add or share that they wanted to?
There's so much more, Grant. If you have 4 or 5 hours, and if we had a couple of pints of beer,
I mean,
I have notes all over the book, right? We didn't cover like even 10% of it.
isn't it funny? We read four books at like 70 pages, and we go for hours on this. I love it. John, do you want to have something?
I think yeah, I have one relatively quick comment. Because yeah, this group I think has puzzled over the relationship between Telemachus and Penelope, um, and it's there's like a straight literal reading of like wow, Telemachus is just like really mean to his mom, um, but you also might think like okay, like what's going on there is that how it's supposed to be? Does that actually represent like Greek ideals about, a mother-son relationship? Um, so I'd like to think that, the relationship is supposed to be better and more satisfying between them. And yeah, in this set of books, my reading was um, that Telemachus is forced into an adult head of household role too early, and he doesn't know how to handle it, and it's a lot of pressure, and it kind of corrupts or even perverts his relationship with his mother because he can't be her son. Like he can't come to her as a vulnerable son. Like he's coming to her as a substitute for Odysseus and is trying to act like a father because his father is absent. And so to me, like the tension and the coldness in their relationship is like another symptom of like what happens when, when the king disappears and like relationships get warped. That was my read anyway.
No, I appreciate that. Does anybody have anything else they want to share on that? Paul?
Um, Yeah, I mean, that's really insightful. I guess for me, that also just struck me though as somewhat of how foreign this world is to us, to the extent it is just exemplary of maybe family relationships, which were there are a number of things this week where a world that's way before any sort of axial age religions of Buddhism or Judaism or Christianity later, obviously before any sort of modern economic understanding, right? So like um there's this line in book 19 around 271, by hustling he gained a heap of treasure that he's bringing home, right? It's like you get rich by just stealing from people, right? or going by war and killing them and taking their possessions. There's the he has this beloved nanny, right, who's mostly doing everything right. And as it was Brendan or someone else was talking about he grabs her by the throat and threatens to kill her. And, even Penelope is, dog-like slaves, as language she uses about some of the women who help her. And, or even just kind of the kind of, preeminence of like strength and disdain for weakness, right? That they have for the potential bigger, and taunting about how they're going to beat him up. And then when he's able to uh, beat up the other guy, then it's like he's honored and they mock him, right? And I mean, this isn't anything too insightful, but just for all the kind of universal themes or timelessness, there's also just like a real strangeness that this sounds like such a terrifying world to imagine actually living in, because I can't like all its values are just like upside down from what we value.
It's certainly a extremely violent world, right? And much, much darker world in many ways, and much more fate determines a lot more, if you will, of many many people, like how much they're going to suffer. They talk in these four books, they talk a lot about hunger, right? Just like how hunger drives everything around them. Like, will there be enough food? Are there enough cattle? Will the black soil produce a crop? And just going back quickly to John's point, I think the Telemachus thing, I keep coming back to. I'm curious if other people have ideas on this too. Is I like the framing of kind of forced into the role too soon. Doesn't have a role model, doesn't know what to do with it, doesn't really know how to behave, and no one in his house that he is supposedly the master of really listens to him. So the one person that he can kind of throw his weight around with is his mother, right? Like, you have to listen to me because I'm the man, and you can almost imagine the uh, bravado of a young man trying to be a man in front of his mother, and how poorly that that can go when you're finding your way. But Max, did you want to add anything to Paul
Yeah,
or John's point?
yeah, no, to John's point, what about the inverse for how Penelope is as a mother to Telemachus? Like, what does everyone think about that? Because I just go back to, for me, the really emotional part was when Odysseus was in the underworld talking to his mother, and like that really felt like true love. Like his mother, didn't die from any disease or old age. She just died from missing him, and the way they really wanted to touch, hold each other, and he couldn't because she was a ghost. I don't know, not that, I don't know how I can compare that to Penelope's relationship with her son, if it feels, now maybe it is because there's this whole deal going on with the suitors, and Odysseus is gone and it's just issues. But like, are there scenes that you can recall that she really truly does love him, or is she just so busy with trying to think about Odysseus, if he's going to come back, is he alive, and she's got all these suitors at the house, that she can't really truly love him like Odysseus's mother, at least for me, feels like she does.
I can only think of really three or four specific interactions across the whole book in which they actually engage in a direct conversation, or where you get a lot about their relationship. But does anyone else have anything they want to add on that, or insights, Daniel?
Yeah, I think actually in these four books that Penelope gets introduced at all. We actually don't know too much about her. Like she's just seen as a prize. And in these books, it's shown that, oh, she's like the intellectual equal of Odysseus, and she's like as good of a liar as Odysseus. So like there wasn't actually a lot of interplay between like, like her and really anyone, including her son. But another thing that came to mind is that as someone in like 2026 reading this book, we forget how long ago this was, right? Like because we have like, like I'm crying at the dog. Like, we get these emotional, like, universal themes. But then there's some stuff that's like, we actually don't know what it was like at all. Like it was so many thousands of years ago that we actually don't know what like the society would have been like. And like, like what it would be like in one country versus another, right? So we have a fairly good idea of what Zemia is. But besides that, like, like how's like son supposed to treat the mother if he's like now like the head of the family? We don't know, right? So like, that's why like, when we judge it, like it doesn't quite make sense. Like it seems like maybe it's harsh, or maybe he's trying to be the man. Like I just think that and the stuff with like, it is like completely pre-Christian, right? Pre Judeo-Christian. So like our cultural framework doesn't even work. But like we slide into the idea that, oh, we know what's going on. We know what morals are. We, like even the ethics came like, much later than this, right? So it's like, hmm. So I think we kind of have to go with like that we don't know, and just like, and actually believe that there's gods and believe that all this stuff is actually happening, and just take it kind of at face value, and not like, put a judgment of like, oh, was he really harsh to his mom, and does the mom even love him? It's like, I and if they did, how would they show it? Like, I don't think we know.
I I think these are really, really important things. And some of the things that I've been thinking about that the last couple of people have talked about. And there is some ethics there. I mean, there's the ethic of hospitality that was really, really evident and pointed out several times between the suitors and Odysseus and the beggars. And so there was that in there, and the people who are loyal even in the absence of Odysseus. And it it makes me think of some of our current day ethical dilemmas, like great artists and musicians who we find out, maybe, and it's sometimes really hard to know the truth of it, but you know, um, Michael Jackson, and did he abuse young kids? I know we don't want to get into that, but like, what's the stance of still liking his music, or other issues like that
Yeah.
is,
The, the
like again, that thing about the throat, really, it was like, whoa, and threatening to kill her. And again, with Daniel's point about we need to be careful to judge people because it was such a long time ago. And look how much we've changed, and look how much we haven't changed with with all of the horrors happening, and
Yeah.
especially the current wars in our world right now.
Yeah, even if we go back to the classical period, which is like, like where Western civilization basically comes from, right? And this is way precursor to that. This is like 500-600 years difference. And before like, Plato, Aristotle, those guys, comes way before that. So like, how do we even think about all the stuff that we think is just normal now, right? In Western culture. Like that didn't come until like much, much later. Like, like half of the millennium later, right? So
a good example of how when you're reading, you want to do the best you can to put yourself in the time frame and understand the biases you bring to it, and like what is the author actually, trying to say. But Colleen, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I really like resonate with kind of what John said to start with, and a little bit what you said about this idea of Telemachus being a like being kind of thrown into this out of the role of being able to be a child, and I think that you kind of see there's one interaction in these books between, like, you're right that everyone's right that we don't see Penelope a lot in most of the book, but there's one interaction between Penelope and Telemachus where he kind of chastises her for not giving Odysseus the beggar a nice bed to sleep in. And he says like, "Oh, it's just like you, mother," something like it's just like you, mother, not to give him a nice bed or make sure that he had dinner or and then the nanny comes in and is like, "Don't be too hard on your mother." And to me that kind of fits with this idea that he he sees Penelope as his only way to exercise his power as the man of the house, and he thinks, he can kind of chastise her. But then he also, I sometimes at one point he comments to maybe Odysseus or maybe he's talking to one of the gods, I can't remember, but he says that he doesn't, or maybe it's the suitors, but he can't bring himself, even though he's grown now, and he could, I guess, kick Penelope out, force her to marry, and take over the home himself. He can't bring himself to do it. He can't do that to his mother. S- So I do think there's some bit of uh, a kind of he some kind of connection or there between them of him feeling this connection to the one parent that was there, but also wanting to be kind of in charge and the man of the house and not exactly knowing how to do either of those things.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Colleen. Well, this is great. This is why I love this group. Everyone seems we've gotten so comfortable over seven of these set or six sessions now. I think of all just sharing in the different pieces. And I'm always blown away by what other people pick up on that I miss or what people can add to the conversation. So thank you all for the great participation as always. Next month we will finish the book. We'll read four more books and we'll be done with this thing. And we will all know this whole story. We'll all understand what happens. The next session I'm planning on running just like these ones, where we'll kind of focus on the four books. And then I have an eighth session scheduled for after the Christopher Nolan movie comes out. It's not obligatory that you go see it, but I will go see it, and just that'll be more of like, what did you make of the Odyssey? Like, what did you think of the whole book, the connections to, um, the having read this classic, like what does that leave you with? What do you think? What do you want to go read next? What would you want to do next, type of thing. So we'll have two sessions basically to do that. And that doesn't mean next month we can't get overall impressions as well, but just so people are aware, next month we'll focus on the last four books. And look forward to seeing everybody there. But Julie, did you want to add something?
Yeah, on YouTube, Stephen Colbert had Chris Nolan on, and it was an extended interview. I've only listened to maybe half of it. It's maybe, I don't know, 15 minutes long or something like that about the movie. And he was on because he directed the movie. So if people want to see that, it might be interesting. And
Well,
I guess he doesn't give many interviews, is what I read.
Well, I am for one very excited about the movie and some of the group chats and things like that. It is very much a topic of like, how good is this going to be? It's how true is it going to be? I watched The Return, and I got to be honest, I didn't love it, and I particularly didn't love it because it felt like they changed the story. So I'm very curious to see how much he leans into telling the story faithfully, if as it were, versus more kind of like taking elements of. And the trailer's out, so if anyone wants to see it, there, Max just shared it. So if you don't know what we're talking about, you can see the trailer there, and go through it. But next month, last four books, and then we'll chat again. So thank you all. Nice to see you all again. Thank you for your time as always. It's a great privilege that you come, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Bye, everyone.